What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another Kerbal Space Program video. And in today's Kerbal Space Program video, we are going to be playing Kerbal Space Program version 1.8, which is the new version of KSP. I mentioned the version number very specifically because last week we did start to explore the new additions to this update, mainly looking at the new boosters because, this update is called More Boosters. Felt like that was kind of the focal point of the update. But there was in fact another major change, and that was some significant graphical enhancements to Kerbin, Mun, Minmus, Ike, Duna, Gilly, and Eve. So I thought, let's go and have a look at these new celestial body overhauls up close in person. So I want to try and land on a few. I decided not to bother with Gilly and Eve, and we'll just be landing on Duna, Ike, Minmus, and Mun, and I guess Kerbin as well. We will be returning, so we can have a look at the surface improvements of Kerbin as well, but that's going to be what we're doing in this video. So I thought of how best to present this. I thought maybe we could do like a refueling SSTO, or possibly, just a conventional rocket that uses stages with no means to refuel itself, but ultimately I decided to go with a mining ship, for a few reasons really. I won't lie to you, the first reason was the fact that this is by far the easiest solution to go with, and I have been a little bit restrained for time this week once again. I mentioned it last week, but I've been doing some major in-home renovations. Time is not something I have right now, and I've also been working evening clinics again this week, so I haven't had that much free time to work on KSP videos, but most of the work is done now, and my evening clinics are winding down, so hopefully I won't have to do many more I'm doing the air quotes thing, rushed videos, but that was a major factor. The other thing is that a lot of people have been asking for more mining ship videos, and the other reason, and I've never really touched on this before, but I feel like these kinds of vessels, these mining ships that are very quick and dirty to throw together and are very easy to fly and, effectively have an infinite range, they're a really, really good way to learn some of the core concepts about maneuver nodes, navigating through interplanetary space, that sort of thing, in Kerbal Space Program if you're not used to these sorts of things, because they don't really have the same risk that a normal mission has where you might run out of fuel. I mean, yes, you could run out of fuel with this thing, but the risk is very, very diminished given that you can just refuel at any given celestial body. So it's kind of a good thing to show off, really. So there will be a craft file in the description, of course, so it might be worth just having a download, if you're a newer player at least, downloading it, giving it a try, see if you can get it to duel, things like that. Some of you may remember all the way back in the day, I made a grand tour of KSP video using a very similar ship design to this, actually. And in that video, I went to places like Elu, Jewel, all of the Jewel moons. And actually, when I made that video, I had never actually been to any of those places before. I know, I started this channel basically being not very good at this game. Some might argue I'm still not very good at this game, but I like to think I've improved somewhat. I definitely... This whole channel was basically an accident. I basically started this channel just so I could enter the Reddit challenges, and I didn't want to have to bother making an album of screenshots because it's really hard to get the screenshots right, so I just documented it through a video. And basically, I got a bit carried away, and here we are today. That was a weird little tangent about a brief history of my channel, but I guess there's not much more for me to really comment on with the actual build process. But it doesn't matter, because the build process is finished. In fact, I can mention very briefly that we're using the new texture for those big tanks there. We can now paint them orange, I guess, so you can use them in space shuttle replicas, because they now can have the same color as the NASA external fuel tank. Although, as Shadowzone had pointed out in his video, they don't really scale that well to the new boosters. Really, the 5-meter pieces are the correct scale for NASA-style shuttles, at least from an aesthetic point of view. Those can't be painted orange, but maybe one day the squad will update them. For now, we've got this. And here we are doing a beautiful launch. Unfortunately, Scatter is still not working, so we just have the rubbish default oceans. I guess it would have been nice if the ocean could have been included in the, visual update, but I guess we've got to take it in ones, I suppose. This is, releasing it in stages is better than not getting it at all. We can just work our way up the atmosphere. Now, you may notice we've got clouds, just like we did last week, but just like we did last week, they're a bit glitchy. And there will be a few graphical glitches throughout this video, namely a big purple dot sometimes appears at the top of the ship and inside the Kerbals when they're walking around on EVA or whatever. I couldn't really do much about that other than the only way I could have fixed that was to uninstall my visual mods, and I felt like the compromise of having that pink dot occasionally, it wasn't enough to make me want to uninstall the visual mods, because overall, having those clouds there, even if they do look a bit jank at times, it is still nice to have them. So that's That's a I'm just warning you now. That's what that is. So it's not part of stock game, to my knowledge. It's just a conflict of my mods with this particular version number. Speaking of conflict of mods with this particular version number, you can see I've got no Kerbal engineer readouts, but I was able to get this thing into a good orbital trajectory without needing to use the map screen. That's because I'm using the maneuver node readout. If you click on that purple button on the bottom left of the screen, just underneath the staging info, you can get to those little green panels that you can kind of see now. They just tell you your periapsis and apoapsis height, as well as your time to those respective points, and you can use those to get your orbit done without needing the map screen. Little top tip for PC players, at least. I don't think console users have that update. And guys, I'm sorry, I don't know when the console version is coming. A lot of comments ask me if I know. I'm not a developer for KSP. I don't know any more than you guys do, so I don't know. And I don't know when the mods are getting updated, so you guys can stop asking me that as well. I'm just a person that likes playing Kerbal Space Program from time to time and uploading it onto the internet for you guys. That is a summary of my channel. So welcome to my channel, new viewers. Here we are circularizing, trying to get off this weird topic we found ourselves once again meandering down. We're not going to complete our circularization using that Rhino stage because we want to ditch it and not leave any debris in space, as is, my general commitment with this save file, to not leave any debris in space. That's why I did that. Now, we're going to go for the first destination on our small tour, not a grand tour, just a wee tour. A wee tour of the Kerbal space program system. We're going to start off with the Mun, land on the Mun, refuel on the Mun, then go to Minmus, and then go to Duna and Ike and back to Kerbin. That's going to be the roadmap. That's the flight plan for this mission. Now, we're using the aerospike engines, so all of our burns will be very, very quick, at least compared to something like the nuclear engines. And, for flight at Duna, they're a very good choice because we'll be using them all the way from the lower atmosphere all the way to the upper atmosphere. Aerospikes maintain their efficiency at all levels in an atmosphere, so they're quite a good choice for Duna. And like I say, they're quite powerful, and they have a small profile as well. They're really easy to build into landers. Things like the nuclear engine are so tall that it's really hard to get landing legs that extend below them, so you're not landing on the engine bell. Aerospikes are great for that. Just a good all-round engine. They're not the most efficient for vacuum burns, though, so with this thing probably could have had better delta V if I'd maybe used a combination of Terriers for vacuum burns and then just like the one aerospike to perform the grunt work of atmospheric takeoff on Duna. But I knew that Duna was going to be the only challenging place to land on, really, or take off from, I should say. I knew I wouldn't need that much Delta V, realistically, for this mission plan, so that's kind of why I went with aerospikes. And that's a potential way you could improve this yourself if you wanted to maybe squeeze a bit more range out of this thing. But like I say, there ain't many places that this thing can't go to. You can just use pit stops and stuff. Eve would be out of the question. I mean, you can go to Eve, but you ain't returning from Eve. You can't do Moho either. Moho needs over 4,000 meters per second of Delta V, in my experience, unless you're willing to do lots of complicated gravity assists to save fuel. But at that point, just build a more efficient craft if you're planning on mining anyway. Joule and Elu, I'm pretty sure it could do. It can definitely do them. What am I saying? I'm sure it can do that. I haven't really thought this through. Anyway, look at this. I was going to say, this is the main focus of this video, isn't it? To check out the new surface. And my goodness, when I was like swooping, I didn't actually do like a scout of this mission first. I just kind of did it. And I remember like my breath, it was taketh away. That was not correct grammar, but I'm going with it. When I saw the surface, I was like, oh my goodness, it looks amazing. Like, I was expecting just a sort of somewhat graphical improvement, but I was really impressed by how this looks. And actually, spoiler alert, I felt that way for the other places we visit as well. But look at that detail on the surface. Looks wonderful. So there we have our obligatory flag plant, the most important part of any celestial body landing in Kerbal Space Program, as I've said. But we're going to try and keep the surface activities quite short because I appreciate we've got 3 more landings to do. So I'm just going to keep things nice and punchy. We're going to fast forward now to the actual process of refining more fuel, which was kind of painstaking because I didn't land in a very ore-rich area. And I probably should have fitted scanning tech to this lander in hindsight to detect the best areas to land, but, you live and learn. And Time Warp is your friend. Sometimes you just got to keep on dropping in and out of Time Warp to make sure that the drills stay activated. It was really weird. Sometimes the drills would just, reactivate automatically once the electric charge was replenished. Sometimes they wouldn't. I don't know if it was just a specific Time Warp setting you need to do. I don't know. I couldn't really figure out the pattern because I'm an idiot probably. So maybe you guys in the comments are more familiar with the mining equipment than I am. That was just a little quirk of this mission. You've also seen I've got those massive radiator, well actually they're the smallest kind, but the extendable radiator panels there. You can see them glowing nice and toasty, so it's a good thing we had them to make sure this thing stays nice and cool. And we've got those solar panels. We don't need them for general flight because we've got RTGs to keep this thing fully supplied with power, but for very electric heavy tasks it's good to have the solar panels as a buffer just to make sure the batteries don't deplete quite as quickly. Though I guess in the end it probably wouldn't have made a huge amount of difference, but it does make this thing look a bit more cool and a bit more spaceshipy, which is a good enough reason in my book. Now I did get a little bit close for comfort there on this ridge. I started flying flat probably a bit sooner than I should have done, so had to do a quick tilt upwards to point radial out just to make sure we definitely cleared it. We might have been able to be honest. I was just eyeballing it, but it's nice to just make sure you're definitely not going to smash into the side of a crater. The Kerbals probably would not have appreciated that. But I'm sure they will appreciate being back in space because a Kerbal's favourite place is space. Probably. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with the KSP Wikipedia page, but I'm pretty sure Kerbals enjoy being in space. They better be, because this is going to be a very long mission. So if they don't like it, they can jolly well get used to it and to go ahead and develop Stockholm Syndrome. So, I'm not sure where I was going with that. We're going to, you can see I've actually reactivated the convertitron there because we did have full ore tanks upon takeoff. We can just convert that into liquid fuel and oxides to squeeze a little bit more delta V out of this thing. Granted, it's not going to make a huge amount of delta V because I only have the really small ore tanks, and we have more than enough delta V to get from Mun to Minmus, but it just satisfies my inner perfectionist, I suppose. But look at this. So you can actually see we didn't get a perfect Minmus encounter right off the bat. Minmus's tilt meant that we couldn't get a direct encounter from Mun orbit without doing some expensive anti-normal and normal burns, so we can just wait until we're in slightly deeper space before we execute those burns, because then it will be a cheaper maneuver node overall. And in fact, I still probably did do the burn a little bit too close to Kerbin periapsis if I was going for real efficiency, but again, like I just said, we have surplus delta V for what we need to do at the moment. And that's why I said it's a nice thing. This kind of mission is a nice way for beginners to get better and get used to doing interplanetary burns and that sort of thing. I think I started this point like ages ago in the video, and then I never really truly finished it. I was saying earlier, when I first went to Joule and Elu and all those far out places, and Dres as well, I had never done it before I did my Grand Tour mining ship video. And in that, I actually learned a lot more about, you know, how KSP and I guess orbital burns interplanetary transfers work, more than any time I had before, I guess. I don't know if that was just because it was just the first time I'd done a mission like that of that sort of scale, or if it was just because I had the confidence of knowing I wasn't ever really going to run out of fuel. I wasn't afraid to take risks or try new things. Maybe that was just my experience, but for me at least, that's what I tend to recommend to people. If you want to just get good at the game, build a ship like this and just go off and explore, and, you know, keep track of your delta V. If you feel like you're not going to have enough to land on one planet, try and land somewhere which is within budget, refuel, and then have another go. It's also just pretty fun to do little tours like this and see the sights all one after the other, and you can compare and contrast different destinations for your travel blog or whatever. It's just something I recommend for beginners. What I wouldn't recommend for beginners is not checking your orbital direction like I did here. I said, let's aim for that flat there, and then adjusted my orbit, and then realized I was going the opposite way to the way I thought I was going. So we're landing on the dark side now, which is usually a place I try and avoid landing in videos because YouTube makes my videos really dark, so I try and avoid all the nighttime activity when I can. This came up this is like one of the top comments last week of saying, oh, Matt always says his videos are really dark. And like, a lot of people seemed like annoyed that I mentioned this a lot. I'm not complaining that my videos get dark. I'm just saying that's why. And then people said I should just adjust the in-game values. But the problem with that is that then all daytime scenes will be way too bright. You won't be able to see anything. So that's why I try and avoid the dark side of places whenever I can, because YouTube makes videos dark. But already we can see the detail in those light beams there of the Minmus surface. And now we can fast forward. Look at that beautiful minty ice cream texture shining through. That's beautiful. That's really nice. I like that. Good job. Maybe I should this is another series I kind of abandoned. I mean, I never really abandoned it because it did finish, but I never did the final episode of it. I did a series called Minmus Base Hotel and Casino where, surprise, surprise, I built a base hotel and casino on Minmus. And I guess that place must look really nice now that Minmus' surface has been updated. But that's it for Minmus Surface. Like I say, I'm trying to keep the EVA activities nice and short to make this video not take too long. I think even despite my efforts, it's still a fairly long video by my standards. But, you know, trying to keep things as snappy as possible. So that was Minmus. We kind of did the refueling and all that off camera, I think, pretty much. And then we can start planning our Duna encounter. Now, I did time warp to get ourselves onto a Duna transfer window, hence why the in-game mission timer has suddenly shot up to over a year. Like I say, I hope those Kerbals like being in space because there's going to be a long mission. I probably, in hindsight, should have launched at a Duna transfer window to avoid that, but I forgot. You know, there is no reason other than the fact I just forgot to do that at the time. I was also probably quite tired. Like I say, I've been doing a lot of decorating work and I've been working longer shifts in my quote-unquote real job. So pretty much KSP, I've been having to wake up at 6 a.m. and playing it before work. And then I don't like getting up at 6 because I don't like going to bed till probably too late. So I was probably a bit sleep deprived, a bit tired, going slightly mad. That is my excuse for the sloppiness of this video. I probably shouldn't have even mentioned this, and I always find a way to draw attention to the ineptitudes of me as a person and this channel by extension. But that's just a reason why these past few weeks have been difficult to stick to the weekly upload schedule that our YouTube algorithm overlords seem to demand. But I think it's kind of a fun mission nonetheless. And I really enjoy this mission, actually, more than a lot of my missions recently, because it was so fun to it was like a whole new game. It wasn't, but, it was so exciting seeing these new worlds for the first time because I hadn't actually seen the texture revamps other than the 240p Twitter videos that Kerbal Space Program put out, which, let's face it, doesn't really noticeably improve the graphics because it's a low-res video. So this was the first time I'd ever seen it in glorious 2K resolution. So it was pretty amazing, actually, to see. That was always something I did when I first started playing the game as well, is I would always avoid looking at what the other planets looked like Lathe and stuff. I just know it had an ocean, but I didn't know anything about what it looked like. And same for things like the surface of Duna, although I guess that's a pretty easy planet to guess what that would look like, or even places like Eve. I always try to avoid looking at what they looked like on the surface because I wanted to go. I was driven by the passion to explore myself. So, and that was I kind of reignited that spark with this update. I got a bit nostalgic for those days of staying up way too late at university. And actually, that was it. Staying up way too late at university, playing Kerbal Space Program. Because that's what I did at university. Okay, here we are entering Duna's atmosphere. Duna has an atmosphere, so we can do all of our slowdown using the air resistance of the atmosphere. We don't need to do any retrograde burns to circularize at Duna first. I mean, we probably should if we're trying to be realistic, because this is going to be subjecting our spacecraft to quite a lot of heat. And we do have the Delta V to do a circularization burn. But I was trying to keep this video as short as I possibly could by cutting out anything that was not entirely necessary. And also because I think at this point in the mission, I was running late for work and I still needed to set the arbitrary deadline of do the Duna landing before you set off for work today. So I think I was just trying to do things quickly. So there we are. And then we can do the final bit of slowdown using the drogue chute to slow us down to a safe enough speed to deploy the main chute. We're still not going quite slow enough because we have a very heavy spacecraft and Duna's atmosphere is pretty thin. So the parachutes don't work quite as effectively as they would do on places like Kerbin, Eve or Lathe. But they are a good means of saving fuel. Now, the surface here looks really, really good. I am aware that the immediate ground around us looks a bit pixelated. I'm not sure why that is. It's a glitch. I did the refueling and stuff, which happened really quickly there. And then I pressed like F5, then F9, and the reloading of the quick save fixed the surface, which I'm showing you here in this nice cinematic zoom down. Look at that. You've got all those little ripples, like sand ripples. Do they have a name? I bet there is like some really weirdly specific scientific name for those kinds of wavy patterns on the sand. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Or am I just talking rubbish? Whatever. Here we are running around on the surface, soaking in the sights. I really like the setting we chose, actually. I mean, I didn't choose it. It was just pot luck. But it was a good setting, I think. We've got that wonderful mountain in the distance. Got lots of rocks around us. And the setting is further improved by the beautiful Lowne aerospace flag that did suddenly glitch out and explode shortly upon re-embarking the spacecraft. So that won't be there now as we prepare to launch and go to our penultimate destination, which will be Ike. Admittedly, Ike looks very similar to the Mun, so I was kind of knowing what I was going to be expecting, but it was still nice to see nonetheless, and I hope that you agree when we get around to seeing it. Now, our Duna ascent was fairly aggressive at first because this craft is not very aerodynamic, as you may have noticed, and Duna's atmosphere is kind of weird. It's very, very thick at first, then it immediately becomes very thin, so I tend to go for quite a steep climb at first, and then I flatten out very, very quickly as you get to the more tenuous aspects of his atmosphere. It wasn't really a very good ascent. I still don't really know what I'm doing with Duna ascents. I just keep doing it this way, and this way just keeps working, so I stick at it. So don't listen to me for advice on how to ascend from Duna, basically. I probably should actually research it and figure out the optimal ascent profile, but as I said earlier in this video, efficiency is not a major concern of this mission because we have a refueling unit and we're going to be landing on Ike again, and Ike takes like no delta V to land on. Well, it takes a bit, but it takes very, very little delta V. It only takes 390 meters per second, so a Kerbal EVA pack has enough delta V to perform an Ike landing from Ike orbit. It's not enough to get back, but oh well. Not of concern of us because we're using the spacecraft. So once we made it to Duna orbit, I deployed the solar panels to get our electric supply nice and buffered so we could run the convertitron once again just to use up the rest of the ore, convert that into fuel, just so we have as much fuel as possible for Ike. Again, though, mainly just to satisfy my inner perfectionist, to make sure we didn't have any full ore tanks unnecessarily, because all that would do is add dry mass. That doesn't actually help fly the spacecraft. But converting it into fuel does. Feel like this isn't a point they needed saying, but I'm saying it anyway because what I'm doing on screen is not that interesting. It's just creating a maneuver node from low Duna orbit to get an Ike encounter, which is very, very easy to do. You've got to be very careful when setting up parking orbits around Duna because it's very easy to accidentally get captured by Ike and either get sent flying into Ike's surface, ejected from the Duna system, or I guess shot back into hitting Duna's atmosphere again. Either way, you've got to be careful. And Ike is also the reason why you can't enter geostationary orbit around Duna, because Ike itself is pretty much in geostationary orbit around Duna. Not quite, but it almost is. So any geostationary orbit around Duna is eventually going to be interrupted by Ike and ruined. So that's anyone trying to be clever and establishing a geostationary satellite network around Duna. I'm afraid you're going to have to dash those hopes, my friend, because Ike has other plans in store for you. Anyway, we are circularizing at Ike, and we can kind of begin to see the texture improvements from the map screen, but we'll get a better look once we leave the dark side of the moon and see for ourselves. And look at that, our Kerbals are... I don't really know how to read their reactions. They look happy, I suppose. We can just time warp along. I know this thing is going to be very, very quick to slow down because we have 5 aerospike engines, which have pretty good thrust-to-weight ratio, so any slowdown is going to be very, very fast. So I'm basically waiting until the last possible minute to start our burn. So I thought this spot looks good. It looks fairly flat. We'll kill off all of our horizontal speed here and get ready to perform our Ike surface landing. And yeah, once again, just like the Mun, I was really impressed by how Ike looks. It looks beautiful. It just used to look like a muddy mess before. Now it looks amazing. I'm far more tempted to visit Ike again now on future Duna missions, whereas before I would have only visited Duna. This place, at least to a flyby, to appreciate those milky heights of the mountain ranges there. And we've touched down. Great stuff. So what I'm going to do now is, before I've only been getting one Kerbal on EVA just to plant the flag and just get it out the way. But I thought this time, it's the last time they'll both be landing on a celestial body that isn't Kerbin. It'd be nice to get them both on EVA together for the first time in this mission. So we're going to deploy the ladders and get all the busy work out of the way so we can deploy the drill, solar panels, radiators, get ready to replenish our fuel reserves. We don't really need to fully replenish the fuel tanks because we can do aero braking at Kerbin. But, you know, our capture at Duna wasn't very realistic. We probably should have done some burning. I thought I'd try and compensate for that by doing all of our circularization around Kerbin using the engines and not have to rely on unrealistic aero braking. I mean, this thing doesn't have heat shield, so aero brakes aren't really that realistic a thing to do. So we'll circularize at Kerbin using engines. And sometimes it's nice to have a bit of delta V buffer when you're doing interplanetary burns, just in case you need to do any course corrections that may end up costing slightly more than you would have otherwise anticipated. But before we can even consider that, we still need to do all of our EVA activities so we can jetpack both of our Kerbals down to the surface and get ready so they can take their Instagrams, snap their Snapchats. What else do the kids use these days? They can Bebo their MySpace page. Okay, whatever. There they are. They probably could look a bit happier. There we are. There's a smile. Okay, I'm good. That's good enough. Let's get them back on the ship and get ready to go back to Kerbin. So we're going to put our pilot in the Cupola module just because we're not actually in range of the Kerbin tracking station. So we'll need her in order if we want to plot any maneuver nodes, which we do. And then we can put our other Kerbal. I didn't even look at their names. It's not one of the main four, so I don't know what they're called. And the preview screen's really... Let's maximize that. Fran, Bus, and Harla. Two heroes of our time. And so the two heroes of our time can get ready to... Are they going? Yep, here we go. So I'm only using the one aerospike here just to make our thrust-to-weight ratio a little bit more manageable. We'd probably massively overshoot our orbital insertion if I used all of the aerospikes at this stage because, again, Ica's low surface gravity. It doesn't take much to get into orbit. It's just easier to use the one aerospike initially. I'm keeping an eye on the time to apoapsis and can see it's dropping. So as soon as we start reaching it, we can then fire up all the other engines, which we're doing here. There we go. And open the map screen and just wait for our apoapsis to get to a satisfactory height. Ike is a somewhat lumpy place, so I tend to go for a fairly high apoapsis. And when we're doing our escape burn, again, Ike has fairly low gravity and all that, so the O-berth effect is not going to be that significant when it comes to our escape burn, so we'd have to be really, really close to the surface when doing that burn. And wait for it, there's Duna! Lovely little shot just there. And we can get ready to perform our circularization. We can then convert the rest of our ore into liquid fuel and oxidizer for no other reason than just to, keep things nice. And, I am very particular about these sorts of things, like I've said. What I'm not very particular about, though, is our maneuver node getting back to Kerbin. So I mentioned earlier, actually, I waited for a Duna transfer window. A Duna transfer window is when Kerbin is 45-ish degrees behind Duna on the map screen. That's when your optimal window is to perform a Duna mission. We're not at a very optimal place now relative to Kerbin, so I thought rather than just, wait for a more appropriate transfer window to open and leave our Kerbals stuck in space even longer, I'm just going to brute force an encounter with Kerbin. In this case, I reduced our periapsis around the sun to cross over Kerbin's line and then press to the skip orbit. I created another maneuver node and used the skip orbit function, and we could just plot a maneuver node that way. So it's going to be a fairly long wait for the Kerbals, but they can suck it up. I was late for work at this point, and I needed to get it done. I'm sorry, guys. I really don't like having to rush videos like this, but luckily it's not going to be a long-term issue that keeps coming up. It's just been life has been crazy for me these last few months. I hope you guys appreciate that, and I hope these videos have still been somewhat meeting of the standard I've set. I don't know what kind of standard I have set, but hopefully it's a positive one. But rushed or not, I still really enjoyed doing this mission. It was one of the more enjoyable missions I've done in a while. And I've said that a lot recently, so maybe that's a positive trend at least for this channel. But just this, exploring the new sites, it really was like a whole new, planet. It wasn't really like a whole new game, which was what I was about to say. But, a whole new kind of experience, it was like going to a new planet that they've added in the game. And I was exploring it for the first time. I felt like a pioneer. Once again, don't really know what I'm saying here. What I'm doing here is I'm just time warping around to the next maneuver node, which is over a year. So sorry, Kerbals. I like how they just sit static that entire time. I do kind of justify these long missions for Kerbals by creating the headcanon that the interior of that hitchhiker service crew module is actually just like a couple of stasis chambers, so that could kind of make it a bit more believable that Kerbals can spend a significant amount of time in deep space. What I should probably do is start building like rotating habitation rings into my spacecraft so that Kerbals don't get like muscular and bone atrophy for these long flights, but again, it was a bit rushed this week. Going forward, it is something I'd like to do. I have done it before when Breaking Ground first came out. It's something I'd like to do again once I have a bit more time on my hands, which hopefully after October will be the case. So I'm doing a quick adjustment burn just here to alter our orbit around Kerbin to be perfectly polar. There's a couple of reasons I wanted to go for a polar orbit. First of all, it means that, you know, when I'm in an equatorial orbit, there's that extra pressure that I have to land back at the Kerbal Space Center, and I literally couldn't be bothered to do that, but also because I wanted to see what the new environmental like ground textures were like at Kerbin. We've seen what the Kerbal Space Center looks like, and it makes sense that that would have extra effort put into it because that's the area that other players would see, and I guess to kind of a lesser extent the areas around the desert airfield and Woomerang launch sites as well might have had some nice, you know, handiwork given to their textures. I thought let's land at the Arctic because the Arctic is a pretty cool place to visit, literally. Pun intended. And also, you know, it's nice and flat, easy to land on, and it would be a good way to not only look at the Aurora Borealis, which comes with this visual pack I'm using, and also it would be a nice way of looking at some environmental areas that might not have received quite as much attention as the Kerbal Space Center area. Possibly. I don't really know. I didn't know. That's why I thought to myself it might be cool to land at the Arctic. So the first thing we're going to do is circularize our orbit, which didn't take very long again because 5 aero spikes and not that much fuel remaining. We've got very good thrust-to-weight ratio at this point. And then we can just finally lower our periapsis to intersect the surface of Kerbin so we can definitely get on our landing. We entered the atmosphere, upon which point I realized that we had a giant purple square clipping into our pilot's head, apparently, but also that I forgot to repack the parachutes from Duna. So I quickly went on a danger EVA to repack them. Luckily, all of the parachutes, including the ones on the far side of the pod, could be packed from the hatch, so it was fine. And yeah, we can go ahead and get ready to touch down. So the big hazard here is the atmosphere. You know, Kerbin's atmosphere is much, much thicker than Duna's, so re-entry heating is slightly more of a worry here. I wasn't too worried about significant damage from re-entry heating because realistically, the only thing that needs to survive is the 2 upper command modules, and this thing could probably litho break successfully and, you know, use the lower stages as a kind of crush zone, and the top stage would survive, but it would be nice if this thing could land in one piece and be recovered and put into some sort of museum or sold off for scrap. You know, it would just be a nice cherry on top of this cake that is this video. I don't know why I've drawn so much. I've drawn this point out so long. But this always happens when, like, the video's about to end. Yes, we did it, guys! The video's about to end. But when the video's about to end, I try and, like, wrap up all my points and not start any new ones. Because, you know, you guys know me and my tangents go on for 7 centuries. So I'm like, I can't start any new tangents. So I kind of have to sit here and just waffle about nothing. Which, granted, is what my tangents are like. But regardless, I didn't want to start on too many topics. In fact, there is something that we need to cover. I decided to have a little bit of fun here and EVA'd one of our Kerbals to do some sick parachuting. So epic. Make a really cool ending to this video. And then we can go ahead and run along and meet our fellow pilot Kerbal once he lands in the ship. I then realised that our ship is going down pretty fast here, so I quickly transferred our Kerbal into the cockpit, and at the very last minute performed a burn to dampen our landing. Probably wasn't necessary, but it'd be nice to get a softer landing as possible. Took a bit of a tumble getting out, but it was fine nonetheless, and we can run him over to his crewmate for a wonderful reunion. I decided to use physical time warp to speed up the process, and he died. The Kraken killed him to death, fatally. And then that happened as well. So it was a bit strange. Frambus Kerman frantically ran over to assess the damage, but gave up when she realized it was too late.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
Luckily, I'm always braced to be thwarted by my own incompetence, and I had made a quick save just before touchdown, so we could reload it. Granted, couldn't have the awesome, radical, parachuting action that we had before, but at least both Kerbals survived. And I thought rather than try out any EVA shenanigans, we can just recover the ship and, recover it safely. But hey, at least the snow looks nice with the new update. And with that kind of bittersweet ending, here is an end screen with videos to check out if you'd like to. These are the links to Patreon and subscribe as well if you'd like to. Remember to smash that like button, of course. There's also things in the description. Thank you for watching, everyone, so much. Goodbye.